I will share you a personal story. First, you can read a quote. The two transformative presidents in the U.S. FDR, the nation of homeowner, is unconquerable during World War II. Ronald Reagan at the NAR convention came out, said that we will preserve the part of the American dream which the mortgage interest deduction symbolizes. So again, the big picture, somehow you can the mortgage interest deduction is the foundation of a good society. Democrat, Republican. One sees the events in Egypt, and hopefully it spread over to Iran. Anytime there's a revolution, no one knows how it will resolve. Egypt could turn into an Islamic theocracy. Iran could turn democratic. One does not know how everything will pan out. But one looks at the passions of the Egyptians as they were demonstrating, and one report that I read was that 90% of the Egyptians don't have a clear title to their land. That means it's a fuzzy ownership of the country. They don't know what they are. The personal story that I wanted to share with you is my mother. I was born in South Korea. I came to the U.S. At a young age, with the whole family, and I was raised in South Carolina, elementary school all the way through high school. My mother and my father, they were born in South Korea, way in the southern part of South Korea. One of the most evil person to ever live on this planet is a person from North Korea, Kim Il-sung. And if you know the Korean War, what happened was that North Koreans came down to South, and they pretty much had it all except for that small corner. And that small corner, American troops came in and eventually pushed out and finally settled down to original borderline situation. But I asked my mother, because my mother lived in the area where North Korean troops came down, swept through it. So what was it like then? And she said, well, first thing the North Korean troops did was they took all the food, and then she was a teenage girl. They took all the food, and they lined up all the school children, and then with the guns right behind them, they're not pointing, but there are soldiers behind them, everyone lined up. They had to sing how great this North Korean leader is. And everyone has to smile and sing that song. Then I asked myself a question. How is it possible, you look at the history of North Korea and the suffering that North Korean citizens go through today, how in the world is it possible that a broad number of North Korean citizens gave their consent or authority to this evil person? What made it so attractive? Is it their personality, persona? What was it? Same thing, I will give you the answer. Same thing occurred in China. China, Chairman Mao, when he came to power, China was poor. And I would say Chairman Mao is another one of those, probably the most evil person to ever live on this planet, because he really enjoyed torturing people. Stalin liked to shoot people behind the door. Mao liked to have a public venue and torture people so people can see. And it's estimated that maybe 60 million people, Chinese people, died at the hands of Mao. Mao came to power in China. China was poor. Chairman Mao died. China was still poor. Only after he died that China began to implement economic reform and they began to rise economically. But what was it about Chairman Mao that he also was a track following, just as North Korean leader did? And part of their strategy was this. You have large number of tenants, few landowners. You go and say, well, we are tenants, they are landowners, we are paying rent to their landowners, or giving them rights or whatever farm product that they have to do. When you solve problem is you kill the landowners, problem solved. So that was part of the appeal because there's a large number of tenants who can agree with that. Well, if you have a solid majority, comfortable majority of citizens who are landowners, you will certainly, that appeal will not be there. And when you see that in the U.S., where we have a 66% home ownership rate, where people are trying to do, so I think America Foundation is much, much more stable because FDR, nation of homeowners, is unconquerable. And Ronald Reagan, perhaps he also sees that people owning property leads to certain civic behavior that you want to promote in the country. So economists will debate about efficiency, $20 billion here, and all that. Those are small things. What really matters is about what is the foundation, what really leads to a social stability in the country. So we need to consider these factors because you have is one of the worst evil dictators around the countries roaming around, and one of their strategy was to say, we are tenants, and when we solve it is easy. But you have a situation where you have a solid majority of the country who are property owners, then the property owners will be there, front line, ready to defend their property. Commercial real estate. Commercial real estate is interesting in the sense that it did not have a subprime mortgage lending. Yet it went through the same cycle as residential. Price increase, price decline. Similar sharp swings up and down. And many academics are scratching their head trying to figure out why this is the case. Commercial mortgage-backed securities. So this would be where Wall Street securitizes, and right now Wall Street was securitized, or I should say the Fannie and Freddie securitized and thereby, so there's a flow of residential mortgages, even though its underwriting standard is a little too tight. But commercial mortgage-backed securities is non-existent because there's no government backing. Imagine what would have happened to the housing market without government backing. Again, simple role, perhaps there needs to be some government backing. So anything that occurred in the commercial had to be not through securities, but through whole loan origination, which means you have local bank, they lend it for commercial loans, and they keep that loan in the bank. They don't sell it to Wall Street for securitization. But even here, it is occurring to some levels, but very, very low levels, because again, the banks are just unsure about the financial regulation, and so there's some hesitancy. So again, without mortgage-backed securities, without government backing, it would have been very difficult for the residential housing market. And commercial market, because it didn't have the government backing, it suffered greatly. There's very little transaction that occur in the commercial sector. So this is the actual number of transactions that occur in the commercial. So imagine your business will decline by 80 to 90%, just huge, huge collapse. The only good news is that it's beginning to pick up from the very low levels, and it's still a long way to go back to normal, but it's beginning to pick up. And I think it's just this is coming from two factors: improving economy, and the banks are flush with cash and they are looking to lend. So I think the combination of improving economy and banks having cash is beginning to lead to some improvement, slight improvement in commercial. Baseline forecast, I anticipate moderate growth, 2 million job additions over the next 2 years. Again, this is just a trying to make a comeback after the 8 million job losses. Unemployment rate probably staying at 9% throughout this year and only going back to normal in 2015, 5 years from now in terms of unemployment rate. From your business point of view, there's job creation, 2 million this year, another 2 million next year. So these are all new set of home buyers, which means there's aside from current homeowners, 4 out of 10 people who switch homes. Aside from that, you have the new set of home buyers coming in. So home sales activity will be improving from this job improvement. Housing market, mortgage rate, I think the forces are for higher mortgage rate. Hopefully the budget deficit do not lead to a tipping point where mortgage rate suddenly rises very sharply. Home values, no meaningful change. Home sales could be a little choppy, but I think the affordability conditions are right now way compelling. I mentioned today's job figures are essentially same as the year 2000, 10 years ago, total number of jobs. But there's a population increase, 27 million additional people living in the country. Many are double up, living with parents. But again, with job improvement, there could be some unleashing of this pent-up demand. And there could be some upside surprise if the underwriting standards became more normal. Commercial outlook all depends on the jobs, and given the record high bank profits, I think the lending will steadily improve. Net absorption, meaning leasing those vacant buildings with more economic activity, there will be more leasing demand. And commercial terminology, cap rates will fall, which means that they could extract perhaps slightly higher rent, but given that there is more credit flow, their prices will begin to steadily rise in the commercial from the very, very low levels. The rents actually may not rise all that much because of high vacancy rates. It's a turning point, but still turning at a very high point. So rent may not necessarily rise, but the price of commercial property, after having fallen so much, may begin to rise because of improved credit flow. Alternative possibility, uncertain benefit is high inflation. There's a large concern about inflation. Too much printing of the money, eventually surely that will lead to high inflation. And I think there will be somewhat higher inflation next year, but higher inflation from this year means that it's going from, say, 1%, 2% inflation to maybe 3% inflation. And so far there's been very little inflation, which is the reason why Social Security check cost of living adjustment has not been made. But if the inflation was to go 6, 7, 8%, then there will be winners and losers. Losers will be people who want to buy a home at that time. Why? Prices are higher. Second, mortgage rate will be higher. When there is an inflation, lender will charge higher interest rate to compensate for loss in purchasing power. But the winners will be the existing property owners, because inflation has always been a good hedge. Real estate always has been a good hedge against inflation. So when inflation is 10, 11%, or any country, when there's high inflation, generally real estate value rise along with inflation. So the winners will be property owners, but the losers will be people who want to buy property at that time. So you are in a unique situation where you may have one additional investor property and you want the prices to rise, but the clients may not come through. So high inflation is an uncertain benefit. That outcome is if there's a deflation, continuing declining prices of everything, this is what Japan is experiencing, and budget deficit tipping point. Once it tips, it's hard to get it back. And the good outcome is just business spending, just unleashing of that pile of cash that companies are holding on to. I said a lot, and I want to take a lot of some questions. So these are some places to go for some update. We try to provide constant daily update as to how we see some of the latest data flowing in. Let me see how much time I have. I will say I will limit it to 5 or 6 questions. And I will let Jay determine who will be the questioner. Thank you very much.
We have the first one. Yeah.